Well, odds are you don't use the word Ubuntu very often, or maybe not at all. It's a type of operating system for your computer similar to Windows.
But it is not Windows, and what works on Windows doesn't always work on Ubuntu.
Hello, I switched to Linux recently and I've got stuff to say about it, so I thought I would tell you, and maybe it would be helpful if you want to switch too. I think there are 3 factors to consider if you want to switch to Linux. The first is, are you interested in learning Linux? Because some things are going to be easier on Linux and some things are going to be harder on Linux, but you're going to have to learn something about all of it. And at some point, if you use Linux long enough, you are going to need to use the terminal, but you shouldn't let that discourage you. Honestly, the terminal's not that big of a deal for most things. Number 2 is, how annoyed are you with Windows? Because the inconvenience of completely switching over your operating system might outweigh the inconveniences that you're experiencing on Windows. And it may just be that you can tweak your current operating system without having to overhaul everything. Moving files and stuff sucks. It can be a big hassle, and it can take you quite a while to get fully set up on Linux. And the third is, how interested are you in editing config files or changing settings? Because Linux can be extremely customizable, but a lot of those like really neat customized desktops include going into files and like tweaking things and just getting really deep into it. So how much you want to do that may influence what distribution ultimately you would want to pick. But I'll say this, if you're not doing complicated video production or working in audio DAWs, and you're not gaming with bleeding edge hardware like the most recent releases, then the choice is pretty simple, I think, and that's just to get Linux Mint. A lot of people talk about Linux Mint as though it's like some newbie Linux, it's only for the kiddos or whatever, but it's just really not the case. The fact is, with most Linux distributions, you can hop in the terminal and make it as complicated as you want to. The thing is that Linux Mint just makes it so that you don't have to do that most of the time. It makes it extremely convenient with things like drivers and just getting everything set up. It's very seamless. But if you did hop onto Linux Mint, you could definitely make things complicated for yourself if you felt like it. So that's my vote. If you're just a regular computer user, get Linux Mint, forget about it, you're gonna love it. So what are my reasons for switching to Linux? Well, everything that I do on my Windows install, I could just do on Linux, so why not switch? Everything is snappier and seems to run better on Linux, so I don't know, it's just kind of a no-brainer for me. I do make videos, obviously I'm making this on Linux, and I do make songs and things, but I'll explain how I do that later, and you'll see that there are compromises or just things that have to be done differently. I'm also really annoyed, maybe even irrationally annoyed, with how long it takes Windows to do things sometimes. We've all been here. You click on an executable and you wait, and it chugs along, and then it opens the executable, but then it acts like it's freezing, and then asks you if you want to force quit the executable, but then the executable loads and it's fine. That kind of stuff just really freaking annoys me, and I never have that on Linux. I find forced updates really annoying, and I do like that on Linux I can choose exactly what I update, and I can choose when I update it. So if I feel like just getting security-only updates for a bit, I can do that, and that's totally okay. And as an aside, when I do update my system, I'm not worried about it crapping out or some kind of catastrophic failure, the kinds of weird stuff we've been seeing on Windows 11. And finally, advertisements and the expectation that my data is going to be harvested for some reason or another, I find really irritating. For one, because it always ends up influencing the way the system performs. But for another, whenever I see an advertisement on my operating system, like in the Windows Start menu or something, I just want to set fire to my computer. It really, really drives me crazy. Okay, so there are 2 other things to consider, and one is, how much do you enjoy tinkering with your operating system, but also how much do you enjoy being required to tinker with your operating system? Because Linux kind of has extremes in both directions. And I'll give you 2 examples. One on the extreme side for tinkering would be something like Arch Linux. Arch Linux is a Linux distribution that requires you to install it from scratch through the terminal, and you build a system that is like really a blank slate, and you make all the choices yourself, and it's a lot of work in the terminal and stuff. But it's also a rolling release distribution, which means that almost as fast as the Arch people can, they roll out new updates. And as a result, things aren't always so thoroughly tested. And although it's not every time, but occasionally you'll run into some instability, or a program isn't going to work right, or whatever. And again, you will have to tinker. So if you don't mind being required to troubleshoot things sometimes, then Arch might be really fun for you. If you're somebody who likes to tinker, but you don't want any underlying instability or just any issues with your operating system, you want your tinkering to be kind of your own choice when you want it, then you would probably want to go with something that's more stable. But the other reason why you would choose something like Arch, something with a fast update cycle, is if you have like very recent hardware and things like that. So if you're like a gamer and you're rocking the latest cards and whatever, something like Arch is going to be great for you, because all of the best optimizations are going to be right at your fingertips right out of the gate. But let's say that you like tinkering and you are running on older hardware and you aren't that into gaming. You just want to be able to mess around with your system sometimes for fun. Then I would say you can kind of do that with any distribution. So it's really up to you how current you want to be with the latest like Linux kernel versions and stuff like that. So if you're a tinker, it's worth looking at the update cycles to decide. There's a lot to learn in Linux anyway, especially if you're going to get into bash scripting and stuff. So you don't necessarily need to be, updating quickly. Anyway, my other example for stability would be Debian. So Debian operates like at least a year or two, I think, sort of in general, behind the current state of the art for Linux and all the Linux stuff. But everything is very thoroughly tested. It's all built around a philosophy of maintaining stability and predictability. And if you're running on older hardware, Debian it's honestly a great choice, because your drivers don't need to be updated super frequently and all that jazz. That's a Debian's security updates are always current, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's rock solid. Debian's one of those operating systems where you can leave it and it's just going to run in perpetuity. It will run longer than we will be alive. No, kitten. What are you doing? What are you doing? You have anything to say? You want to talk about Linux? But again, if you're just a regular computer user, just get Linux Mint. It's built on top of Ubuntu, which itself is built on top of Debian. So you get a lot of that core stability from Debian, but Linux Mint is a little more user-friendly in terms of providing you with like needed drivers and software and stuff like that. Debian is fantastic too, but it's going to require you to do a little more like Linuxy things than Linux Mint might. Okay, so for video production, I won't get too deep into this, but I'll just cover a couple of things that may or may not be deal breakers for you. The first is that anything Adobe like Premiere Pro is just not happening on Linux. But really, is that such a bad thing? Because, it's Adobe. DaVinci Resolve does work on Linux, but it sometimes requires a little bit of tinkering because it's meant for NVIDIA cards. And NVIDIA cards themselves can be a little wily on Linux to begin with. However, that doesn't mean it does not work. It does. I've had Resolve running perfectly on several different Linux distributions. But there is one major caveat, and is the Resolve does not support the AAC codec on Linux, which means that you're going to have to likely manually convert videos in order to get both the video and sound working together. I ended up making my own script for this. But if you hate doing that and you're not doing a ton of animations and stuff like that with your video production anyway, you can use Kdenlive. Kdenlive is free. It works beautifully on Linux. No codec issues. It absolutely rocks. So unless you're doing something that is, professional level, You can use Kden Live, it's all good. Over in the audio production world, your options are pretty limited. FL Studio and Ableton don't run natively on Linux. However, you do have Bitwig Studio, which runs natively on Linux, matches the Ableton workflow pretty closely, and is very powerful. It's excellent if you're producing electronic music especially. And of course, you have the almighty, the GOAT Reaper, which will run on pretty much anything, runs natively on Linux, of course, and is as awesome here as it is anywhere else. But again, you have to consider what VSTs and plugins you're using and whether or not you're going to be able to use them on Linux. You can use a tool like Yabridge to get Windows-only VSTs working through Linux, but your mileage may vary. In my case, none of my VSTs have ever worked properly through Yabridge, but other people say that they've gotten all kinds of things, including some of the plugins I have working through Linux, so I don't know. Okay, well that's all I got. I hope it was helpful. Bye-bye. Hey. Thanks for watching my video. I appreciate it a lot, and I think you rock.